Hello, it's good to be back with you for Advertising 3020. I'm Greg Pitts. You guys saw me a few weeks back. It's nice to be with you, even if it's via recording today. So I do hope that, you're going to watch this video. I've heard good reports from Dr. Hall and Professor Haynes, who met with you about, again, the same thing that I said to you. What a fun class you guys are. And I'm enjoying the class that I'm meeting with now, Journalism and Media in the Movies, something else I teach. There'll be a section of it next fall. But I'm also happy to come back and meet with you today via a video to talk about television and radio advertising. I think I even told you this at one point when we met. I'm a radio TV guy. I started off a million years ago working at a local radio station, believed very much in the community service side, but also to the advertising messaging side that a local radio station would provide. Again, the world has changed so much these days in terms of how people are reached and how we seek information and respond to content. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the advantages and disadvantages of broadcast and the cable advertising. We'll touch on television and radio. And by the way, I'll get to this in a second, but we really are talking about broadcasting, meaning signals that are fed over the air that you can receive for free, though you may also use a cable access point or something like that to get the content. Anyway, we'll talk about, you see the objectives on the screen, how TV advertising buys work, audience trends, some things about TV viewership, how they're competing against other media forms, and even how television advertising, radio advertising are bought and sold. Now, for me, I used to be on the side of the people selling the advertising to, say, an advertising agency representing a client, or in some cases directly to a client. Maybe it's a mom and pop business, maybe it's a corporation with its own internal ad buying people, and I'm representing a broadcast outlet trying to sell to them. So let's go ahead and move on. So broadcast and cable television. Let me first of all say, if you watch ESPN, if you watch CNN or Fox News, technically that's not television. That's a cable channel. In fact, it's an advertising-supported cable channel. So you do have to have a cable subscription or some kind of online over-the-top subscription in order to get that service. Broadcast television, generally your local NBC, ABC, CBS, or Fox affiliate, can be received with a simple over-the-air antenna. You put the antenna up outside your home or maybe in your attic, hook it up to the back of your TV set, and depending on where you live, you can get anywhere from a dozen to maybe 35 or 40 or even 50 channels. In fact, in Murfreesboro, where I live, we've got an antenna in the attic, and I bring in about 50 over-the-air TV channels, and most of those are advertising-supported channels. So if you say to me, gosh, I'd much rather go to Netflix because I can stream content that comes to me with no commercial interruptions, well, what are you going to do when you want local news, or when the weather is really bad outside and you want to know, is that a tornado or just a windstorm coming your way? So broadcast TV, as my slide says, is transmitted through electromagnetic waves that travel through the air. There are nearly 1,800 commercial TV stations, probably another 400 or so non-commercial. They're using frequencies that we call UHF and VHF, though in some respects none of that really even matters anymore, whether it's a U or a V. It did a long time ago because of how signals traveled, but today we use digital television. All the TV signals are digital, which means, for example, that Channel 2, WKRN in Nashville, will broadcast its ABC signal on one of the channels, but then it will have these other digital channels that travel over the air, and I think it's 5 other digital channels that they push out. So technically 6 TV stations that they operate, all advertiser supported. Some of those TV stations are independent, meaning they don't have a network affiliation. Some are affiliated with a network like NBC, ABC, CBS. And it's interesting, too, that 1,800 or so commercial TV outlets, most of those are running multiple digital channels. And I would probably say, on average, they're probably running 3 or even 4. So, 4 times that suddenly means about 6,800, 7,000 over-the-air video signals that are spread throughout the United States. Where does the money go? Because television is advertiser-supported. This is an interesting pie chart. It shows that 33% of the money spent on advertising goes to TV. Well, it shows here an even bigger chunk, and it doesn't give us the percentage, but an even bigger chunk goes to internet-based advertising. Please understand that I'm going to call that 40% plus going to internet. Some of that slice of the ad money actually will go to TV because they're also simultaneously running online content sites that accompany their over-the-air broadcast signal or the cable-fed signal. Here's poor little radio over here at 8.6%, which is oddly enough not bad. 30 years ago, radio was getting about 9.5%, just a little under 10 cents of every dollar. It's eroded some because of Spotify, because of people simply putting money in other places, but that's actually not bad for radio. Here's what I think that's just crazy to me to see. Take a look over here at newspapers. Wow. That is such a thin slice of the pie for newspapers. Again, if you look back and saw this pie chart from 40 or 50 years ago, newspapers would have gotten, well, at one point they would have gotten about 55 cents of every dollar spent on advertising. Then it dropped to 50, then it dropped to 45, and wow, it looks to me like it's about the same size as our radio slice. Of course, even then, newspapers are taking part of this internet slice. So don't be misled by this broad label and assume that this is Google and Facebook and Instagram taking everything. By the way, speaking of Facebook, if you followed the news yesterday, you perhaps heard that Facebook is rebranding its corporate name from Facebook to Meta, M-E-T-A. If you didn't see that, take a look at that. And I say yesterday, this is Friday as I'm doing this, so it was Thursday. By the time you see this next week, it may be a week or so old. But yeah, take a look at the story. TV as a business enterprise is continuing to change and trying to figure out, because no business wants to roll over and play dead. So I subscribe to this. It's free TV News Check, and this is an upcoming seminar that they're going to sponsor called Reinventing TV for a Connected World, ways in which TV will reach you through over-the-air, through cable, but through what we would call an over-the-top platform, that is, you directly stream broadcast television content in much the same way that you might stream things now through Roku, or in some of the channels, TV channels may actually be embedded in Roku in the future as well. Anyway, interesting stuff. Don't ever think that any medium or business enterprise is dead or that they're waving the white flag to surrender. They're going to continue to try to innovate. The real question, of course, will be how well they innovate, and then whether or not you guys as consumers consume any of their content. And when you're in a professional role in the advertising community, do you spend any money there? So other things to show you here, the top 10 network TV advertisers. Procter & Gamble making all sorts of, health and beauty aid consumer products, from diapers for babies to shampoo and bar soap and lotions and deodorant, all kinds of things. Again, you run down the list. Now, Berkshire Hathaway is kind of an odd company to see on the list. It's actually a holding company for billionaire investor Warren Buffett. What on earth would he be doing showing up on a list of advertisers? Well, he owns companies that would advertise. Probably the most notable brand that he owns is Dairy Queen. He bought Dairy Queen a number of years ago because they make lots of money for him, and Dairy Queen would advertise, and then other things, other businesses that he owns as well would advertise also. So other things to tell you. Well, cable television was originally created to bring over-the-air broadcast signals into people's homes because they either didn't want to or couldn't conveniently put up an outside antenna. And it grew at an extraordinary pace over the last 3 decades or so, because they brought in all these new, what we would think of today in some respects as early streaming services, but they were mostly ad-supported, and they weren't the kind of on-demand. So cable television made it possible for home box office to grow. But home box office could not set up an on-demand system like we think about with Netflix. Instead, it had to put together a program schedule, and it would have a movie that started at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 9:30, and you would have a guide that would tell you about it. But it's still been extraordinary because it's satisfied consumer appetite for all kinds of programming. The Entertainment and Sports Programming Network, ESPN, developed because of cable, and of course it quickly shifted away from any kind of entertainment programming other than sports. But gosh, what a strong brand that's been. And it mentions here they're mostly privately owned. I'm going to actually pick a little bit at that and say they're privately owned in the sense that they're owned by a corporate entity, like, for example, Disney owns not only Disney theme parks, it owns a series of broadcast television stations, the ABC television network, ESPN, and other cable channels as well. And it is true that since 2010, because cable subscription prices, because they were mostly monopolies, they kept going up, and up in price. And as a result, people said, I'm going to cord cut. I'm going to use digital TV signals to bring in programming by putting an antenna in my attic. I'm going to go to an over-the-top streaming service like Amazon Prime or Netflix or anything else. And of course, that option to look for less expensive product or services led to the growth of so many other things, including Roku, Apple TV, and other things. Here are the most viewed cable networks, and it doesn't really give us a perspective as to what this 2.4 million for Fox News means, but I'm going to guess that that's actually probably a daily reach in audience because I've seen some of this data before. And 2.4 million is a lot, but consider, and they've labeled it viewers. I'm going to actually guess that it's households because that's a more common metric for measuring television or cable viewership, not individual people, but households. And a household, typically consists of more than two individuals. There are about 105 million or so TV households in the United States for us out of a population of about 340 million or so. And the other point to make about this is that even if that is households, 2.4 million, that's a lot. But then again, it's not so many, given how many households there are, 105 million or so. So streaming video has been, of course, the big 500-pound gorilla that's elbowed in and started to draw our attention as consumers. Muzak was an early streaming form of uninterrupted music with no commercial interruptions, competing with radio. What's made the change, of course, is that broadband, high-speed internet entered our homes. We shifted from a modem using a computer to check email to a dedicated high-speed stream for video content, and that pushed along everything. So that greater bandwidth, as my slide is referencing. YouTube comes along. It's mostly ad-free, particularly in its early days. People started looking for other things to watch, other ways to get their video content, which of course then changes the dynamic for advertisers. Where do we go? And that, of course, led people to say, oh, well, besides Netflix, let's come up with other over-the-top streaming models that are ad-supported. Not everybody wants to pay the, 10 or 12 bucks a month now for a Netflix subscription in order to watch an unlimited number of D-rated movies. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Netflix, though I have the subscription in my household. So some other things to talk about. Television does continue to be rated as being very influential and persuasive. More people watch TV, traditional TV, than they consume any other kind of medium. The heaviest users tend to be what I'm just going to call typical Americans, middle income, high school educated. Television, especially when we're talking about free TV, it reaches a home. They don't have to spend extra for it. The technology is warm, fuzzy, and familiar to them, so they want to watch. Older women, the highest watchers of TV because they're home, and sometimes the older women may be a household of one. Do you watch 2 hours of TV a day? If you say to me, I don't watch any TV a day, then do the math and think a little bit about how heavy some of those viewers must be heavy in terms of the number of hours they're watching. If the average is 2 hours a day and those 18 to 29 watch the least amount of television or video programming. So where does television fit in integrated marketing? The narrowcasting of some television channels, home and garden TV, food TV, even some dedicated sports channels, ESPN Classic, other kinds of channels make it possible to heavily target a niche audience that loves that channel, loves that kind of content, and you get to know the demographic of that audience pretty well. It does still become a very cost-effective way to reach a large audience. So even though you might not be a consumer of TV yourself, understand that when you make advertising decisions, your goal is to look at where your audience is, and don't try to reach them according to your own media consumption patterns. Television advertising can be purchased at the network level through these dominant 4 television networks. There are also other smaller networks, but also you can go directly to a local TV station and make buys. You can also make buys through an owner who, for example, Nexstar owns or controls programming for 200 plus TV stations around the country. And you could go to Nexstar and you could say, I want to buy every station you own in the 20 largest TV markets. But it does give an advertiser and an ad agency great convenience. It makes it possible to buy individual programs or to buy audiences by clusters. The disadvantage, of course, is that there is a fairly long lead time and not a lot of flexibility, because you have to buy around the programs that they have scheduled, and you have to hope that those programs continue to perform well in the marketplace. If you bought advertising on a program and then all of a sudden a popular football team winds up having a live game scheduled on a competing channel at the same time, then all of a sudden your audience might be drawn away to that sports event and not watch where you had previously placed your ad. Here's a look at advertising cost, and what we're actually looking at would be the viewership here in millions, but then this is the price of an ad in thousands. So Big Bang Theory on CBS, one ad cost $286,000. We don't have the Super Bowl listed on here, but you know as well as I do, we all see those stories that come out every year pre-Super Bowl. Here are the top Super Bowl ads. Here's where somebody's spending $1 million or $1.2 million or $1.3 million for a single ad in the Super Bowl. That's a one-off, one-time event that becomes very special for the advertiser. Part of the advantage of spending that $1.2 or $3 million for that single ad would be all the hype and promotion, the I'm going to call it the free viewing or free exposure they earn by being in the Super Bowl. But here you're a traditional advertiser and you buy a Sunday night NFL ad on NBC, $670,000. Wow, but look at the audience size. It's really not even as large as Big Bang Theory. And by the way, I hope you caught that they keyed that in wrong. That was somebody else who created this PowerPoint, not me. It is Big Bang Theory. Why would you spend that kind of money when this audience here is a fuzz larger and costs less? Well, maybe because you want that particular demographic. And I don't mean to stereotype, but Sunday Night Football will deliver a much more heavily male audience than will Big Bang Theory. So TV advertising can typically run as what's called a spot announcement, and that's usually a reference to a 30-second ad, again, sold nationally, sold locally. 30 seconds is the most common form. You do get some 10s and 15s. You get the occasional 60, but most of the time it's historically sold as a 30-second ad. And there are a cluster of ads, of course, between programs. You know, we all know, we sort of hate that sometimes, but that advertising makes the programming possible. Imagine if you had to pay a subscription to get that programming, and that's, by the way, always been the pushback for the reason why advertising was there, because it subsidizes the programming. Another way to buy advertising is through syndication. I'm sure you guys don't watch this show very much, but Wheel of Fortune. You've probably at some point seen Wheel of Fortune, or you've seen Jeopardy. And both of those are what are called syndicated television shows. So Wheel of Fortune in the Nashville market might appear on an ABC station. In fact, I think it does. But in another market, it might appear on the NBC station or a Fox affiliate station. In that particular case, a local TV station has purchased the rights through syndication, it's called, to run that show on its local station at a given time, and it's usually the 6:30 time slot for Wheel of Fortune. That show makes money by selling those episodes, but it also sells advertising within the show, and it's typically to a national company. So that's one more way to reach an audience and buy inventory, ad inventory for your particular client if you're an ad agency. So we've got first run syndication. Sometimes syndication shows as barter. You may have a program that appears on a local station, and the local station runs it in exchange for giving up advertising time. And then you have reruns. For example, Big Bang Theory is also on cable, but it also appears on some local TV stations as off-network syndication, while Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy are first-run syndicated shows, meaning they're made exclusively to air on those local stations. We talked about movies and product placements. We're seeing product placements beginning to occur not only in films, but increasingly in television shows as well. That is one more way to reach an audience, and something that we should never forget about. Here are just a couple of explanations of how the advertising distribution can work. So here we are as an advertiser. You can buy directly from the network, but you could be an advertiser and then deal with the producer of a local show in syndication, who then places the show on a local TV station. And the network, the programs that run on a network, do come from usually an outside independent producer who makes a deal to sell those to the network, who then passes those on to the local TV station. And meanwhile, as the advertiser here, we're on the outside because we're trying to figure out how do we deal with these people and get the best, most effective commercial ad buy for our client. Here's another form of television advertising that we see, and in some ways, this might be the kind of advertising that is the biggest turnoff for many people. Direct response ads. I'm talking about 30-minute or even 60-minute program length advertisements or infomercials. You've seen them. There's the frying pan ad, the magic frying pan that nothing ever sticks, or the sham wow. Even some of those J.G. Wentworth ads that run for more than 30 seconds, get your stopwatch out and time them, those may actually be appearing as direct response ads where there's actually a way to use the data to figure out how many people contact J.G. Wentworth or contact and buy the frying pan set or whatever the item would be. Originally, they weren't respected, and I'm going to actually say I don't think they're respected today either, but my goodness, believe it or not, they're surprisingly effective. And you'll see them showing up on cable television as well. Turn on one of your favorite channels on a Saturday morning, let's say nice and early, around 6 or 6:30 or 7 a.m., and you may very well see not a regular program, but you'll see an infomercial on there, because the cable channel recognizes they can make more money selling the time to the infomercial rather than running a traditional program and trying to run local ads in the show. Local advertising is still very common. NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, all their local affiliates, local TV stations. In our case, WKRN, WTVF, News Channel 5 in Nashville, Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 17, the Fox affiliate. All of those stations carry local news, local weather, local sports reports. Maybe it's the high school report, it's the college team, whatever it would be. But they sell lots and lots of spot advertising, and they do have viewers, and they have strong brands. And particularly with something like local news, if you want to know what's going on locally today and you don't want a newspaper anymore, where are you going to go? Well, honestly, you're not going to find substantive local news on any kind of social media unless it's content created by one of the staffs of one of those local TV stations or maybe the local newspaper. So they're still valuable, and they provide a good service, and more importantly, they draw viewers and they sell ads, and they're part of that 33% of the advertising dollar that goes to TV. We mentioned product placement already, again, paying a fee to have a product in a movie, but also in a television program. Sometimes television creates the celebrity for a particular actor, a well-known face associated with a particular, television program, but then that individual can jump along and can wind up becoming a spokesperson for a particular product. Sometimes the product might be even associated with the show that they've been a part of. Television advertising is defined by market areas. I referenced that earlier. Nashville is, I want to say market 28 or 29, something like that. The number one market is New York. Number two is Los Angeles. Other top markets include Philadelphia, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Atlanta, Seattle, all major cities, major metropolitan areas, and their geographic areas that we set aside, a city in multiple counties, and sometimes several states. For example, the Nashville market does include counties in Kentucky, but interestingly enough, no counties in Alabama just yet, but counties in Kentucky are a part of the Nashville market. And television audiences are measured, as I referenced earlier, by households. So we also, in the course of tracking television audiences, we track total households, but then we look and we see how many households are even using television. Morning TV, you guys are probably not fans of the Today Show or Good Morning America, but maybe your mother or grandmother or grandparents or parents watch it. The TV battle in the morning is pretty significant, even though a fairly small number of households actually use television in the morning. But the Today Show at one point and Good Morning America were the two that mostly slugged it out. And each of them, got about 35% of the audience in the morning, and then the other 30% was split among CBS and various other channels. But the HUT level was for morning TV was only around maybe 7 or 8%, meaning 7 or 8% of all the TV sets, all 105 million, only about 8% of those were actually turned on, which would have been about 8.5, 9 million households with a TV set turned on in the morning. Program ratings, audience shares, total audience, audience composition, all those are things that are a part of TV advertising. Audience composition and an audience explanation or characterization is what we would most want to know about in advertising. Who's watching? 18 to 49-year-old women, 18 to 49-year-old adults. Can we find out anything as a secondary factor about them? What's their education level? Where do they live? We can, by the way, break down data based on zip codes. Zip codes will give us an idea of housing cost. Housing cost will give us an idea of incomes. All this kind of stuff. It's complicated, but in a world of computer and mega data, it's no longer as complicated as it used to be. So if you're buying ads, you might very well choose to buy according to gross rating points. You might say for a client, I want to buy 100 television rating points. And your TV sales representative would say, great, I've got my 10 o'clock newscast. It typically does an 8 rating, 8% of the households in the market are watching it, or 8% of maybe a desired demographic are watching it. It generates 8 rating points, and I'll give you 12 different evening episodes of my 10 o'clock news. 8 times 12 is 96, and I'll place another ad in my 6 o'clock news where we typically get a 5 rating, and so technically you're going to wind up with 101 points, but is that okay? And you're likely to say as an ad person, sure, that's fine, but only charge me for 100, even though you're going to bonus me 1 extra rating point. By the way, if that seems odd and complicated, don't let it be too complicated. Just understand that you buy rating points. How do you know how many you want to buy? To be blunt, sometimes it's arbitrary. Sometimes that's something that your ad agency will simply work out in advance, and they'll say, in this market at this time, either nationally or within Nashville, Tennessee, here's what we want to buy because we think this will reach the audience. And maybe it's not arbitrary, it's really educated, and it's a part of an experiential decision, understanding what you're trying to accomplish for your client. And there is a course called Media Buying and Strategy that you'll get to take a little bit later on, where you'll look at some of the things associated with ad buying. So media buyers will, in the process of buying GRPs, they'll say to the station sales rep, what time slots do you have available? And then the ad agency person and or the sales rep will both maybe independently look and see what the ratings are as they're going through and doing the calculation. And they'll very commonly do something, like maybe a cost per rating point calculation or a cost per thousand. And the ad agency is, of course, looking for the cheapest, the best buy, the best deal they can get, while the salesperson is looking to maximize their revenue by placing your ad in a show. And of course, you don't always buy the cheapest cost per point, because sometimes that low-priced cost per point won't really deliver the kind of audience you want in the first place. So along the way, then, as we're buying television advertising like any other kind of purchase, it does involve some negotiation and some bundling. Sometimes the sales rep, TV station sales rep, is going to try to, bundle several things. Maybe you as an ad agency buyer are going to try to bundle things that you want, and eventually you'll strike your deal. And you could very well have an ad that gets preempted along the way. So an ad might be scheduled to run on Thursday at in the 10 o'clock news, and you're paying $1,000 for the ad. TV stations will tell you, by the way, if somebody else comes along and they agree to pay us more than that $1,000, we reserve the right to preempt your ad and put it at another time. And how much more would somebody have to pay? Usually it's 30 or 40% more. So somebody, you're going to pay $1,000. Somebody else says, I'll pay $1,400. Of course, anytime we have severe weather or a breaking news event, that could also cause an ad to be preempted. But then the station will work with you as an ad buyer, and they'll get your ads placed later on. And generally, that works out just fine. They'll send you what's called an affidavit of performance, indicating that the ads did run, and they'll show the time. And eventually, and this all happens well after the fact, when ratings data comes in, they will they'll reconcile it, you will and the station will, according to the number of rating points actually earned. And if they don't achieve the rating points, then they might give you some make goods. And that would just be another ad that runs to help make good on the number of rating points they promised they would deliver. There's all kinds of media buying software that's out there these days. Arbitron and Nielsen are the two companies that are mostly associated with the ratings data. And if you work either for an agency or you work for a station, there are opportunities for you to dive in and get to know the software and figure out how it works. These are the common day parts for a television station. You guys have probably heard of a guy named David Letterman. He's no longer on TV, but was a longtime talk show host. His television show actually ran in this late fringe time period on the Eastern Time Zone, 10:30 for us. But that's why, one of the reasons why they took the name Late Night, because it was late fringe, and they didn't want to use the word late fringe, but Late Night with David Letterman. This is the late newscast here for us, 10 o'clock in the Central Time Zone. Prime time, of course, for us, running 7 to 10 p.m. We know that audiences, households, families no longer watch TV necessarily by this same kind of breakout schedule. Partly we don't because we got a DVR, and you can shift things. And your DVR may, of course, let you skip some ads. And that's where technology breaks in. And of course, it also changes the dynamic of what you're buying if you're buying advertising time in an ad-supported program, and if the DVR lets people jump through the ads. Oh gosh, it all gets complicated. Let's start to talk about radio, but before we do that, I'm going to pause, and we're going to split our video content up into two sections: radio one section, TV the other, and obviously I've just finished the TV side.